In today's episode of the Health Collective podcast, we're joined by Harriet Barcella, an adventure and mindset coach who works with women on really finding the joy in life. In this episode, some of the key aspects of what we discuss is how to react to your experiences in a way that brings joy, no matter how negative that experience is. And we discuss techniques in how to react in a way that serves rather than hinders you. We discuss the importance of adventure and gratitude and really finding time for ourselves in amongst the chaos of life so that we don't end up feeling resentful. We also discuss different elements of life. Harriet lost her home in the 1990s recession, just as she turned 8 years old. And it was her perception of that moment that really changed how she approached mindset moving forward. So if you are struggling with any issue of negativity or resentment or challenge in your life, and you feel that you need a bit more adventure and joy and gratitude, then today's episode is exactly what you need. And if you're looking for any help in your health, body, or mindset, or equally you're looking for a little bit of adventure, why not head to our website, thehealthandfitnesscoach.com. We're running a retreat in Bali, May 2024, and it might be right up your alley. It's a composition of coaching, yoga, relaxation, private villa, scuba diving, island hopping. We've got a private yacht on hand. It's an amazing 8-day retreat to a tropical paradise surrounded by beauty, nature, and other women just like you looking to release the stress, relax the body, and find adventure in life again. In the meantime, enjoy today's episode. It's so wonderful to have you all here. And I'm really grateful to be joined today by Harriet Barcella, who is a life and mindset coach with an obsession with finding joy in the everyday. So she's going to fit right in with this community. Today, we're talking on the subject of controlling how we react to our experiences and situations, and how those reactions and perceptions then determine the quality of the life that we lead. Now, Harriet was the third of 4 sisters and has spent her life being inspired and empowered by incredible women. And after training as a breakthrough coach and NLP practitioner, she moved from her career in the charity sector and launched Harriet Barcella Coaching, providing transformational coaching and adventure coaching, which is something that sounds awesome to me, to help women really step into their potential. So first of all, Harriet, a massive welcome. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's so lovely to be here.
I'd always like to start these episodes just by finding a little bit about you, your background, and what led to doing what you do. Because whenever I speak to someone who helps women in relationships, there's usually a relationship in the past that led to that. Whether it's someone like myself doing weight loss and body transformation, I was overweight myself. So for you, what led you into the path that you're doing now? What was your personal story?
Such a great question, and it's quite an interesting story for me because I sort of knew, I've always known that in my career I wanted to give back. I was always aware that that was something really important to me. And I had a history degree, and I sort of came out and I was getting my first job in the recession, the last recession, and I thought, I want to give back. I want to work in the charity sector. That's what's going to do that for me. And I did that for 20 years, and I loved it. But what I did was I worked in marketing and comms primarily. And I think it was sort of after children, I started to think something about this isn't really fulfilling me. And what I realized was actually I was kind of too far away from the action. So the marketing and comms was great. And of course, I know logically that that has a huge impact on charities and the people that need to use those charities. But actually, I wasn't seeing it. And I started to realize that actually I'd kind of got my value of giving back all wrong. And what I wanted to do was a bit more tangible than that. And that was when I realized that I kind of have this capacity to work with people. And I'm sure lots of other coaches feel the same. I'm one of these people that you walk down the street and you ask someone how they are, and suddenly they've told you your entire life story, and you're like, oh wow, that was unexpected, but great. And I thought, how do I use these skills I've got? So it was, this journey, I guess, was a bit different in that coaching has transformed my life, but not from a particularly dark place to a really positive place. I was in quite a positive place in many ways, but I just realized I had this ability to do it, and it was living within my values. And I guess in my life, I've seen the power of mindset. So we lost our house when I was very young. We were sort of left homeless. I'm one of 5 children, so I've always felt guilty because I always say that I'm the third of 4 sisters. I have a brother too. He's equally important. I just don't work with men. I work with women. So I always talk about my sisters. But we lost our home, and my parents were left homeless with 5 children under the age of 12. And what I saw there was this resilience and this ability to find joy and react to the situation with huge sort of amount of love, and just this ability to make life great, even though really it was really hard. And so I suppose that has made me see the power of mindset in life, and so there's this passion to really share that with other people.
Losing a home, with 5 kids. I'm glad you mentioned your brother. I didn't know he existed, so I'm glad that we can bring him in. How old were you when that happened?
I was 8 years old. So I'm number 4 of the 5. So I had a younger sister who was 6, and my brother about 13 at the time. It was almost overnight. The house was repossessed. So I think my parents had something like 3 days to pack up their home. And from an identity perspective, it was big because we were very lucky and very privileged. We lived in this beautiful home with a swimming pool and a tennis court and an orchard, and life was incredibly privileged. So to go from that to literally having nowhere to live, it was a huge upheaval for everybody.
At that time, during the recession, when that happened, as an 8-year-old, you have an awareness. You're aware of your own autonomy as an individual, but you are also interlinked with your parents in the sense that they are safety. They are home. How do you remember what you felt like, or how that impacted you at that age? And it's quite a transitional age as well.
Yeah, really transitional. I do. I took it really hard, actually. I really struggled with that shift. I know that my mum always says that we ended up, we were lucky, we had wonderful family and friends. So the family was split up for a few months. I lived with my family, siblings lived with aunties, and my brother lived with a friend. And I was really ill. I was off school, I think, for 2 weeks. And my mum's always said, I don't think you were ill. I mean, I was ill, but it was, the illness was caused by the stress or the emotion of it. It wasn't it wasn't caused by physical symptoms, if that makes sense. I was experiencing physical symptoms. And so I did take it hard. But I think the thing that, and I suppose this is what stuck with me through my life, is that my parents really made it feel quite normal. It didn't feel that weird. I don't know how it didn't feel weird, because of course it was a really bizarre situation, but we were still showered with love. We were still cared for. We still knew that we had this network of people that cared and supported us. I don't remember really seeing my parents being anything but positive. And I know I've spoken to them since, and they said that on the day that they had to hand over their keys, they handed over the keys to the bailiff, I suppose, and went straight from there to a funeral of a good friend of theirs who died aged, I guess in his 30s or 40s. And they said it was such a moment of perspective. Yes, yeah, they'd lost their home, and that was hard, but there was so much still to be grateful for. And I suppose I saw that, and so I think whilst I found it hard, we definitely came through. I think all of us came through it with a remarkable level of positivity, and I really credit my parents with that.
So that experience really sort of sets the framework for what I mentioned in the introduction, which is it isn't necessarily the experience that determines our life, but our perception or reaction to it. So as you have gone through your life and you've taken that experience with you, I'm sure there have been other instances in your life that haven't been happy clappy. There have been other moments, just like everybody, where it's felt like an experience that is negative. How have you approached controlling your reaction to these experiences, and how has that determined the quality of your life moving forward?
Yeah, I think it's so interesting. I think that this topic of control has probably been one of the things that subconsciously I've been doing because of these experiences I had when I was young. Subconsciously, I was making choices and reacting to situations with quite a lot of positivity. But it's only really in the last maybe 5 years since I started coaching,
Mm-hmm.
I started my own journey of being coached, that I've been really conscious about it. And for me, that's probably been one of the most powerful things, is when anything happens, to be able to say to myself, okay, this has happened and it's hard or it's good, whatever. Sometimes it's positive things. How am I going to react to the situation? And really being conscious that I get to make these choices. I get to choose the reactions. And it's hard to choose the reactions when we're not conscious that that's what's going on. Because we all know a lot of what we do is driven by our subconscious. It's driven by without us really thinking. And so for me, realizing and noticing, actually, I have control here. I have so much more control of me than perhaps we give ourselves credit for. We're often so busy, aren't we, trying to control all of the things that are actually outside our control. When we realize it's us that we can control, I think it's so powerful. And one of the things actually I've been talking about a bit recently that I realized, I guess, after having kids. I've got 3 kids and they were in quite quick succession. So I had 3 under 3. That's not true. I had 3 and under. So I realized that I'd become a bit of a martyr. I'd sort of stepped into this role where I was sort of being quite resentful of a lot of what I was doing. I was doing things, but I was doing them resentfully. I was sort of thinking, oh, if I don't do it, no one will, and those sorts of things. And this was a moment where I think I made this active choice that I was going to change my life. I was thinking, actually, I don't want to live resentfully. I don't want to live without joy. I want to live with joy. I want my children to see me living purposefully and happily and joyfully. And so I started to make choices every day, and those choices reflected this decision. So I think, there's been lots of moments in my life, jobs and losing jobs or being made redundant or those sorts of things where you can react and you can take the lessons. But I think actually it's almost in the everyday stuff that it really starts to make an impact. It's when you can do it every day and think, actually, what choice can I make here that's going to make life a bit better? Or what lesson can I learn here? Because, even in the hardest things, there's always something to learn. And that sort of shift in perspective, I think, is really, really powerful.
That control of our reactions and perceptions of a moment is so key. And I think what you said about doing things resentfully is probably something that a lot of us can relate to, especially when kids come along. We have, I will contradict anyone that says they had children for selfless reasons. We all have children because there's a selfish desire to have people around you, to have unconditional love. They come along and we realize, unconditional love and pleasure from this isn't necessarily, especially at that age, happening. And so we put this pressure on ourselves that says, well, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to do everything for everybody else because nobody else is going to do it. And we create a resentment towards them. It's nobody's fault, but that resentment, that phase that a lot of women will have gone through, whether it's to do with business, kids, husbands, wives, whatever it might be. If someone's feeling like that, what would you suggest is the first step that they could take to address that feeling? It doesn't help anyone. It doesn't help themselves nor anybody around them, but it's also quite a big hole to get out of if you're not sure where the first step would be. So what would be your guidance at that?
Well, I always think, really, with any change, the first step is to acknowledge what's going on. So to notice it and pay attention and say, this is what's happening. And actually then to go back to that control bit, to realize that this is something that you could choose to continue with, or you could choose not to. And different people are going to respond in different ways. I work with women all the time, one-to-one, on this sort of thing. So, coaching can be a really good tool when you find yourself really stuck in this rut. But I think there are just, a series of questions you can ask yourself. What am I getting from this? Because often there's a certain sort of secondary gain, is what we kind of call it in coaching, secondary gain from this feeling. So actually I'm feeling grateful, but actually it's making me feel like I'm being a good mother, maybe. So maybe there's something that we're getting from it, that we need to recognize that, so that we can find that a different way, and not in this kind of, through this kind of resentful giving. And then who's it serving? Ask yourself, who is this for? Who is gaining from this? And actually, when you can realize that nobody is, you can often let go of that resentment and that anger. And then I suppose it's asking yourself, well, what would be a better way? What would be better, and how can I make that happen? And when it comes to, mothering and caregiving in all its forms, and women take on these roles so often, if looking after elderly parents, or looking after their children, or just looking after friends, or that caregiving role. It's how can I come at this from a place of joy and giving with love, rather than giving I feel I must. And sometimes that means dropping things. It might mean letting go of certain standards that you have, even if that's just for a period of time. It might be making things easier. It might be talking to the people around you and saying, actually, I really need help, and I need this to be something we do together. So I think very often it's communication and talking with the people around you as well. But I think it is quite unique to everybody. And I think for some people, you can work through this stuff without help, but a lot of us need help. And I think, coaching is one of those tools that can be really powerful. But whatever you do, acknowledge it. Acknowledge what's going on. Don't just allow it to keep building and building, because it will only get worse. So just looking at what's going on and acknowledge, actually, this isn't great. I'm not really enjoying this version of me. And I don't have to be this version of me forever. I'm capable of change. I can change.
What I loved about that guidance that you gave there was, it was almost about how you frame the questions, because most of the time we ask ourselves really poor quality questions. Why am I not good enough? Why can't I do this? And of course, our brain is going to come up with exceptionally negative answers. And the questions that you were providing were, how can I? What can I? How can I improve? How can I change? And when we ask ourselves greater quality questions, we experience a greater quality life. So I love that. And one of the things that I have to ask you, because I mentioned it in the introduction, and this is a new one on me, an adventure coach. An adventure coach. I mean, I have this image of following you up a mountain right now and abseiling. So what is an adventure coach? What do you do in that capacity?
So I kind of have to give the background of this. So when I talked about that martyrdom thing, feeling like a martyr, so I started to do very active things for myself. I made a choice that every day I was going to sit down for 10 minutes. I was going to do something for me for 10 minutes before I went to school pickup, because 10 minutes, I could do a job, but actually it's probably not going to make that much difference to my life either way, whether I wash whatever it is up, or whether I write 3 more emails, or whatever it might be. So every day before pickup, I'd spend 10 minutes just doing something for me. And it was intentional. So there was no guilt, because I'd made a choice that that's what I was going to do. And I did that for ages. And then over time, I started to realize that was okay. It was okay to do things for me. And actually this was positive, and I was feeling better for it. And, sometimes it was exercise. In fact, often it was exercise. I'd literally do like an 8-minute blast of exercise, or, I'd get outside, or I'd read a book, or whatever. And after a while of doing that, I decided that I was going to do something big for me. And I actually booked myself on a 10-day trek in Jordan. So I took myself away from the kids. The kids were really young still. I want to say they were 6, 5, and 3, or something like that. So they were little kids. And I went, and it was a really intentional choice. I felt no guilt about it. I just went for it. And what I realized when I was on this trek was how much I learned from it, you know, about living in the moment, about being present, about finding joy in the journey, about finding the lessons when things are hard, about the kind of the comfort that you can find in getting out of your comfort zone, about realizing how capable you are. And I came back almost as a different person. I had this confidence about me. Had this huge sense of self-esteem. And this was stuff I'd been building on, right? But it all came together on this 10 days. And then I did it again. And again, there's a background of this. I did a lot of this before kids, and then I just kind of fallen out of it. And I thought, actually, these lessons that you learn on the mountains are incredible. They are so powerful. But then what happens is we just come back and we just carry on living. So I thought, how can I take this thing that I love, coaching, and this thing that I love, which is getting away from it all and having that time and space to really think and to learn, and bring them together? And so I came up with this concept, which we call mindset adventure. And it's the opportunity to go away. The next trip I'm doing, which is in October, is 5 days to the Pyrenees, so it's not too far. And it's trekking for 3 days in the Pyrenees. It's that mindfulness that comes from just walking. It's putting yourself out of your comfort zone, challenging yourself, feeling like you've really achieved something, but all with 2 coaches alongside you. So there's coaching before, there's coaching throughout, and there's coaching after. So that all those lessons that you learn and then you come back and forget about, you bring them into your conscious. So generally you're going to learn them, and they're going to kind of you're going to have these kind of subconscious things that you realize, oh, actually, it's really nice living without my phone. Oh, actually, it's, really amazing to do something that makes me feel powerful and strong and alive and free, which, I know is what you do as well with, with your work. But actually, having that coach there with you, having me and a colleague of mine there with you, means that we can really bring those kind of subconscious learnings and bring them into your conscious, and then put them into a plan so you bring them into life. So it's a really exciting program, and it's kind of just it's a 6-month coaching program in 5 days, because and you would know this from everything you do. When you come into an hour session or a 90-minute session, you still have kind of all that other stuff going on. You've still got those thoughts. You've still got, the to-do list to continue afterwards. But when much like a retreat, when you take yourself out of that for a few days, you leave the to-do list behind, and you've got that time to focus. So it's a really kind of supercharged way of having coaching that is also super fun and super joyful and makes you feel great. Yeah, that's it. And I think it's fairly unique. I haven't seen other people doing it. So yeah, it's exciting.
Absolutely. It sounds brilliant. And, it's completely in line with everything that I would espouse as well. We're taking a load of women away for 8 days to Bali next year for a very sort of similar, where it's all about coaching, but waterfalls and yachting and scuba diving and island hopping, but all framed within the coaching of the subconscious. So that, because just like you said, most women will go away on, let's call it a holiday, and feel free, and feel, for probably the only time in that year, unburdened by the stress of the everyday. And as soon as they're back in the reality, all of those stresses pile on, even to a greater degree. And actually, if you frame these kind of, we call it a retreat, you call it adventure coaching, but sort of similar, framed by that coaching, you're able to bring back that sense of calm and that sense of connection with the self. So yeah, anyone listening, go to the Pyrenees in October, come to Bali in May next year, and you'll be set for life.
Can you imagine?
Right.
Wow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So what I'd really like to finish up on today is discussing a word that you used quite a lot, both, pre this discussion, but also throughout the last 20 minutes, this word joy. Now, the word joy is something that I use, a lot of people use, but is one of those words that I find is maybe used without a full understanding, in the sense that I will hear women say, yeah, I'm happy, without truly understanding what happy really means. And then they finally discover it and go, oh, I was never happy. That wasn't true happy. So this is quite a broad question, but what does joy mean to you?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I talk about joy a lot. And joy for me is that kind of almost that inner spark that can happen at any time. And I actually think joy and happiness are quite different. I actually find this idea of chasing happiness can often be quite counterproductive, because we get this idea that we're going to be happy all the time, but it doesn't matter what we've done. It doesn't matter how much inner work we've done. Things are going to happen in our lives and we're not always going to be happy. People are, we might get sick, or somebody around us might get sick, or people die, or we lose jobs, or, all sorts of things happen in our lives that are challenging and tough. And we're not going to be happy through all of those. But what I do believe is that whatever's going on, there is always joy to be found. There is always the sunshine, or there's, watching your children laugh, or there's having a dance in the kitchen, or there's taking a minute just to meditate or to be meditative in whatever way you do that, or there's exercise, or there's all these different things that can spark this kind of inner feeling of fulfillment and happiness, for want of a better word. And I think that if you can chase that instead of this idea of happiness, like this kind of blanket idea, we're just going to be happy, then I think that's really achievable. And joy and awe, and I've heard people recently talking about glimmers, the opposite of triggers. So you feel bad, and glimmers make you have this moment of positivity. And one of the things I really encourage any of my clients to do is to look for joy, but really actively, to consciously look for joy, so that when it sparks, you pay attention to it and you notice it. Because so often those moments just go unnoticed by us. And as soon as we start to notice them, as soon as we start to make that a conscious decision, I'm going to notice, I'm going to pay attention. How do I feel in this moment? What is actually happening for me? And we start to notice them all the time. And, my children laugh at me because I'm constantly like, oh, wow, look at that cloud. And they're like, Mom, it's just a cloud. I'm like, but look at it, it's so beautiful. And they laugh at me, but they do it too, because they're so used to it. It's so habitual to just look for things that make you feel good. And so for me, this idea that we can be happy all the time is probably one of the quite damaging ideas that we have as a society. We forget that even the person that you see that looks positive all the time, there's still sadness, there's still hurt, there's still grief, there's still all this stuff going on for them. But it's about, for me, looking for that joy. And actually the thing that I always say to people to do is to write down at the end of every day just 3 things that have made you feel joy that day, and just make it so that you really notice it, you really pay attention, and it can be really life-changing. I love the word, I love the idea of joy, and gratitude is sort of the other side of that. I think for a lot of us, joy is an easier thing to tap into than gratitude, because I love gratitude too, but sometimes I think it can come with feelings of guilt for what we have and what other people don't have and all those things. But joy is so pure, it's just this pure feeling of goodness. Yeah,
I really enjoy that sort of explanation with the idea of a spark, because you're right. Happiness, people seem to, in society, believe that happiness is a constant state of being. And in order to truly find happiness, it has to have the reflection of sadness or anger. Life is about mountains, it's not about flat terrain. And it's about having those sparks, those moments that really bring you to life, counteracted by the moments that really are a challenge. But you need the peaks and troughs in order to experience true peace. Otherwise, you miss out on so much of life. There are dark moments, but it's how we, I suppose, bring it back full circle, how we react, and whether we choose to remain in the dark or choose to look for the spark, which rhymes. It wasn't meant to, but it sounds a bit like a kid's story. So, I really love that. And what a great way to wrap up today's episode, sort of on that idea of joy. So with that in mind, I would always encourage, anyone coming onto this podcast to sort of share with us what they feel is the biggest takeaway they would want our audience to have. So if there was one nugget that they remember for the rest of today and keep hold with them, what might that be?
It's really hard because we've talked about so many really interesting things.
Yeah.
But I think it's a toss up between the control and the joy. But actually, I think the thing that we can do ourselves without help, without needing a coach, without needing to go to Bali or to come to the Pyrenees, is to look for joy. So if I was to say one thing, it would be to today, give yourself a few minutes when you feel something that makes you, that when you feel that spark, just stop and take it in and be aware of it. And if you can make it a habit just to write down 3 things every day that bring you joy. It doesn't need to be a formal journal. It could be on a scrap of paper and you can throw it away. It doesn't matter. Just write down 3 things every day that bring you joy and just focus in on that joy, because every day is going to have its challenges, but it's also going to have those sparks. And if we can focus on and pay attention to the sparks, then life is always going to feel better.
What a fantastic nugget. And in that light, as an idea for anyone who wants to sort of run with it, I do something very similar, and I have 3 children too. And so we all do this. And I, probably like a lot of women listening, was in the my house needs to be perfect stage at some point in my life. Kids came along and realized that I had to let go of that expectation to find some happiness. And so we had a wall. We still have a wall, which was the kind of children kept destroying it wall. I kept painting it and realized, what can we do with it? And it's our gratitude wall. So every day we have a Sharpie, and me and my husband and my kids all write 3 things that we're grateful for on that wall. So we now have this massive wall in our house with all of these sunset, birds, friends, health, water, all of these sort of different things. So, find a way to just bring that joy, bring that gratitude into your life. I think that's a great nugget.
That's so beautiful. And funnily enough, we've got a post box in our house that we do the same. And then at the end of the year, I love the idea of it on a wall. I think we might be graffitiing a wall tonight.
Absolutely. It's something that you just keep with you forever, and you look at it and it just makes you smile. So look, it's been absolutely wonderful having you. And for everybody who needs a bit of adventure in their life, all of Harriet's details will be in the description of the podcast. So feel free to go and have a look and get in touch if you need any help in that area. But that just leaves me to say thank you to Harriet for joining us. And thank you to all of you for listening to today's episode. And I really look forward to seeing you on the next one.